My sister-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone she cared about, but she never imagined that same woman would quietly dismantle everything she built. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter. I have never been the loud one in the room. I work hard, keep my head down, and believe that effort speaks louder than words. I married Daniel Carter because I loved him, not because of his family name or status. I thought love would be enough. I was wrong. Daniel's sister, Vanessa Carter, was everything I wasn't. She was confident, wealthy, and admired by everyone in the family. People listened when she spoke. They laughed at her jokes. They praised her success like it belonged to all of them. I tried to stay invisible around her, hoping that being polite and quiet would earn me respect. It never did. The night that changed everything was a family charity dinner. It was held in a large hotel ballroom, filled with well-dressed guests, donors, and relatives. I had helped prepare for the event quietly, as always, but no one mentioned that. Vanessa stood at the center of the room, glowing with attention. Daniel stood beside me, holding his drink, saying little. When it was time for speeches, Vanessa took the microphone. At first, she talked about generosity and success. Then her tone shifted. She looked straight at me and smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. She joked about how some people marry into opportunity instead of earning it. She mentioned how not everyone in the family had real careers or real value. Every word landed on me. People laughed. Not everyone, but enough. I felt my face burn as eyes turned in my direction. I glanced at Daniel, waiting for him to step in, to say something, anything. He didn't. He froze, staring at the floor like he wasn't part of it. That silence hurt more than the laughter. I forced a smile. I kept my posture straight. I didn't want to give Vanessa the reaction she wanted. Inside, though, something cracked. I realized in that moment that I was alone in that room. Not one person stood up for me. Not my husband. Not my family. As the applause followed Vanessa's speech, I clapped too, slowly and quietly. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm. But deep inside, I felt a shift. That humiliation didn't make me weak. It woke me up. I saw the truth clearly for the first time, and I knew I would never be the same again. When I first married Daniel, life was not easy. We didn't start with comfort or luxury. Money was tight, and we counted every dollar. I worked long hours and still came home to cook, clean, and make sure everything ran smoothly. I believed that marriage meant standing together through struggle. I never complained because I thought sacrifice was normal when you loved someone. While I was adjusting to married life, Vanessa was already treated like royalty. She was spoken about with pride at every family gathering. Her business success was always the main topic at the table. Relatives bragged about her as if her achievements belonged to all of them. I noticed how their voices changed when they said her name. It was filled with admiration. When my name came up, it was usually followed by silence. Vanessa presented herself as confident and self-made. What no one seemed to notice was how much help she quietly received. I was good with numbers and organization, and whenever there was confusion around finances or paperwork, I stepped in. I reviewed contracts, fixed errors, and organized important details that others ignored. I didn't ask for praise. I believed helping family was the right thing to do. Over time, I started to see a pattern. During meetings or dinners, Vanessa would speak as if she had done everything alone. Ideas I had suggested earlier would come out of her mouth as if they were her own. When people praised her, she never corrected them. Instead, she smiled and accepted the credit. If I tried to speak, she would interrupt or change the subject. In private, her tone was very different. She made small comments that cut deep. She questioned my intelligence, my choices, and my place in the family. She reminded me that I married into her world, not the other way around. These comments were always quiet, just loud enough for me to hear. If I ever looked upset, she would say I misunderstood her. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't want conflict. I thought patience would earn respect. But each time she dismissed my work or made me feel small, something inside me grew heavier. I began to realize that this wasn't careless behavior. It was planned. Looking back, every smile, every joke, and every compliment she received was carefully protected by her. My role was to stay in the shadows, useful but unseen. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The humiliation I faced wasn't a mistake or a bad moment. It was the result of a long pattern. Vanessa knew exactly what she was doing, and that truth changed how I saw everything. That night, after we returned home, the silence between Daniel and me felt heavier than any argument. I couldn't sleep, and by morning, the pain in my chest turned into words I could no longer hold back. I told him how embarrassed and hurt I felt. I asked him why he stayed quiet when his sister spoke about me that way. I needed to know if he saw what I felt. Daniel sighed and rubbed his face like I was asking too much. He told me I was overthinking it. He said Vanessa liked to joke and that I was being too sensitive. He reminded me that the dinner was important and that causing a scene would have made things worse. His words felt cold, like he was protecting peace at my expense. In that moment, I realized he was more worried about family approval than my dignity. As days passed, I noticed things I had ignored before. Bills arrived that I didn't recognize. Accounts were linked in ways that made no sense. When I asked questions, Daniel became defensive. That only made me more curious. Quietly, I began to look closer at our finances. What I found shocked me. Daniel was deeply tied to Vanessa's business. Loans, shared accounts, and signed guarantees connected them in ways he had never fully explained. I recognized numbers and documents I had once helped organize, but my name was nowhere on them. The work I had done was now officially listed under Vanessa. It felt like my efforts had been erased on purpose. The more I uncovered, the more painful the truth became. Daniel had allowed this to happen. He benefited from Vanessa's success while pretending I had no role in it. Every late night I spent reviewing paperwork, every problem I solved quietly, was now part of her image. He never corrected it. He never protected me. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining myself. Instead, I started saving copies of documents, emails, and records. I wrote down dates and details. I kept everything organized and hidden. I didn't tell Daniel what I was doing. I didn't want another dismissal or excuse. Trust in my marriage slowly fell apart. I slept beside a man who no longer felt like my partner. Every conversation felt forced. I understood then that betrayal doesn't always come from loud actions. Sometimes it comes from silence, from choosing comfort over truth. I stayed calm on the outside, but inside, I was preparing myself. I knew I needed to protect what was left of me, because no one else would. I had never talked much about my work because I didn't think it mattered to anyone but me. Before marriage, I built my career in finance and operations. I worked with numbers, rules, and systems. My job taught me how businesses run behind closed doors, how compliance keeps companies alive, and how small mistakes can destroy everything. I was trained to notice what others missed. As I looked more closely at Vanessa's company, I started seeing problems that didn't make sense. Things looked successful on the surface, but underneath, there were gaps. Important rules were ignored. Records were incomplete. Decisions were made quickly without protection. What scared me most was that these were not accidents. They were shortcuts, taken to move faster and look bigger than reality. Then it hit me. Some of the systems holding her business together were ones I had helped set up without knowing the full picture. I had given advice, fixed processes, and solved issues when things became messy. I believed I was helping family. In truth, I was building stability for something that was never honest to begin with. My work had become the backbone of her success, even though my name was never attached to it. At family gatherings, Vanessa didn't stop. Her comments became sharper, her tone more confident. She talked about power, control, and success like they were trophies. When I was around, she made sure to remind me where she believed I belonged. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. I noticed how she enjoyed it, how humiliation gave her a sense of control. This time, I didn't react. I watched. I listened. I paid attention to every word she said about her business, every small detail she revealed without realizing it mattered. The more she spoke, the more I understood how fragile everything really was. I realized something important during those moments. If I fought her emotionally, I would lose. She thrived on reactions. She wanted tears, anger, or embarrassment. That was her power. I decided I wouldn't give her that anymore. Instead, I chose silence and patience. I stopped defending myself. I stopped trying to explain my value to people who didn't want to see it. I focused on what I knew best: structure, truth, and timing. I understood that the strongest response wasn't loud or dramatic. It was careful and precise. Vanessa believed her empire was untouchable. She believed I was too small to matter. That belief became her biggest weakness. While she enjoyed attention, I studied foundations. And once I saw how weak they were, I knew exactly how to move forward, without emotion, without warning, and without mercy. After that, I began to pull away in ways no one noticed. I still showed up. I still smiled when required. But inside, I was no longer present. I stopped sharing my thoughts and feelings with Daniel. I listened more than I spoke. Staying calm became my shield. I knew that any emotional reaction would be used against me, so I kept my distance quietly. I spent my time organizing what mattered. I gathered copies of contracts, agreements, and records I had worked on over the years. I didn't take anything that wasn't connected to my own effort. I saved emails, notes, and documents that showed my involvement. Everything was stored carefully, legally, and without drawing attention. I treated it like work, not revenge. Vanessa noticed my silence and mistook it for defeat. She spoke to me less and dismissed me more. Her confidence grew. She assumed I had finally accepted my place. The way she looked at me changed, like I was no longer a concern. That made things easier. People underestimate silence, and she underestimated me. Daniel followed her lead. He became distant and cold. Whenever her name came up, he defended her without hesitation. I stopped trying to be understood. Each time he chose her side, the space between us grew wider. I realized I wasn't losing him, I had already lost him. When everything was in order, I reached out to a lawyer on my own. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't accuse or threaten. I simply asked questions and listened. The lawyer reviewed what I brought and explained my options clearly. There was no drama in that office, only facts and reality. For the first time in a long while, I felt grounded. I understood where I stood and what I could do. I didn't rush anything. I wasn't angry. I was focused. I left the meeting with a plan and a sense of control I hadn't felt before. At home, nothing looked different. I continued my routine as usual. No one suspected a thing. Vanessa remained loud and confident. Daniel stayed loyal to her. They both believed I was fading away. What they didn't know was that my exit had already begun. It wasn't loud or emotional. It was careful and deliberate. I wasn't running from them. I was stepping away with clarity, ready for whatever came next. Once everything was settled on my end, I began stepping back in a way that followed the rules. I didn't announce anything or explain myself. I simply stopped doing the work that had never officially been mine. I removed myself from tasks I was no longer required to handle. No laws were broken. No agreements were ignored. I just let things return to how they were written on paper. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Vanessa's company kept moving, at least on the surface. Then small issues started to appear. A report wasn't ready on time. A payment approval was delayed. Files that were usually updated without effort were suddenly incomplete. These were not dramatic failures, just quiet disruptions that slowed everything down. Soon, those small problems grew. Vendors began asking questions about unpaid invoices. Long-term partners requested meetings to understand sudden changes. Emails piled up without clear answers. Deadlines were missed, and excuses became common. The smooth operation everyone praised started to feel unstable. Vanessa grew irritated. She complained loudly about employees losing focus and teams becoming careless. She called meetings and demanded explanations. She blamed staff for not keeping up with expectations. Her tone shifted from confident to sharp. Still, she never looked in my direction. She didn't consider that anything had changed with me. Daniel mentioned stress at home, though he avoided details. I listened without reacting. I kept my responses neutral. Inside, I knew exactly why things were falling apart. The systems I once maintained were no longer being quietly fixed. The support that had kept everything balanced was gone. As pressure increased, Vanessa worked harder to appear in control. She stayed late, made promises, and pushed people harder. But effort couldn't replace structure. Each missing detail caused another delay. Each delay caused another question. The company began to feel the weight of its own shortcuts. I stayed out of sight. I didn't interfere or offer help. I watched carefully as tension filled the spaces I used to manage. It was strange to see how quickly order turned into confusion when no one was guiding it. What surprised me most was how no one connected the dots. They had never noticed my role before, so they didn't notice my absence now. Vanessa's panic showed in her voice and posture. Her confidence cracked in private moments, though she still performed strength in public. She believed the problem was everyone else. That belief kept her blind. I felt no joy watching this happen. Only clarity. I understood that foundations matter more than appearances. When pressure came, the truth always surfaced. And as the weight increased, I remained still, knowing this was only the beginning. The pressure eventually forced the company into a legal review. What started as simple questions turned into deeper inspections. Lawyers and advisors asked for records, approvals, and proof of compliance. Documents were requested that no one could easily provide. Meetings were called to understand how things had been handled for so long. As files were examined, a pattern became clear. Many of the safeguards and systems that once kept the business stable were connected to my work. My input, my structure, and my oversight had quietly held everything together. Without it, the gaps were impossible to ignore. The review showed that I had been the one ensuring rules were followed, even though my role was never formally recognized. Further investigation uncovered misrepresentations in reports and agreements. Numbers didn't match. Obligations were described one way on paper and handled another in practice. These weren't minor mistakes. They pointed to decisions made to protect appearances rather than truth. The confidence that once surrounded Vanessa began to weaken. Then Daniel's name appeared. His finances were tied through shared liability and guarantees he had signed without fully understanding the risk. Advisors explained how his personal assets were now exposed. The room grew tense. This was no longer just a business issue. It was personal. Vanessa reacted quickly. She insisted she had trusted others to handle the details. She suggested I had been involved and questioned my intentions. For the first time, she spoke my name out loud in a professional setting, not to credit me, but to protect herself. Her tone carried blame, not proof. That was when I finally spoke. Calmly and clearly, I presented what I had prepared. I shared contracts showing my responsibilities had been limited on paper. I showed emails, timelines, and records that proved when my involvement began and ended. Each document was dated. Each point was supported. There was no emotion in my voice, only facts. The room fell quiet as the truth settled in. Vanessa's story unraveled under simple questions she couldn't answer. Her attempts to shift blame failed when evidence told a different story. Daniel avoided my eyes, realizing too late how much he had ignored. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I let the truth do the work. Years of silence finally had weight. In that room, it became clear who had built stability and who had taken credit for it. And once exposed, there was no way to hide it again. After that meeting, everything moved fast. Audits expanded and legal actions followed. Partners pulled away. Contracts were frozen. What once looked powerful began to crumble under pressure. Each new review uncovered more problems, and there was no way to stop it. Vanessa's business, built on image and shortcuts, could not survive real scrutiny. Money disappeared quickly. With it went the family's loyalty. The same relatives who once praised Vanessa stopped calling. Invitations ended. Support turned into distance. When there was nothing left to gain, admiration vanished. I watched this happen without satisfaction. It only confirmed what I already knew about how fragile their loyalty had been. Daniel struggled the most. He finally understood how much I had protected him and the family without ever being acknowledged. The systems I had maintained had shielded them from consequences they never saw coming. Now that protection was gone. He tried to talk, to explain himself, to apologize for not listening sooner. His regret came too late to fix what was broken between us. Vanessa reached out privately. Her voice was different, no longer confident or sharp. She spoke carefully, asking to meet, asking to talk. When we finally did, she didn't defend herself. She apologized in a quiet, desperate way. She said she never meant for things to go this far. She admitted she underestimated me. For the first time, she looked afraid. I listened without interrupting. I didn't argue or remind her of the pain she caused. I didn't need to. I told her I wasn't interested in revenge or humiliation. I didn't want apologies that came only after consequences. I wanted closure, not control. I made it clear that I would not help fix what she had broken. I also made it clear that I wouldn't celebrate her downfall. Her empire collapsed because it was never built on truth. That wasn't my burden to carry. When I walked away from that conversation, I felt lighter. Not because I won, but because I was finally done. I had said everything I needed to say, calmly and honestly. There was no more silence left inside me. The chaos around me continued, but I stayed steady. I didn't chase validation from the family or demand acknowledgement. I knew my worth without their approval. Watching everything fall apart taught me one final lesson: power built on disrespect always destroys itself. I didn't destroy her empire out of anger. I simply stopped holding it together. And once I let go, the truth did the rest. After the business collapse, I made a decision that had been growing inside me for months. I filed for divorce. I did it quietly, on my own terms, making sure everything was legally clear and fair. I didn't seek drama or confrontation. I only wanted to reclaim my life and my peace. When Daniel learned of my decision, he finally spoke honestly. He admitted he had failed me. He said he hadn't seen my efforts, hadn't protected me, and hadn't stood up when it mattered most. His words carried regret, but no longer could they change what had happened. I listened, and I understood. I had loved him and trusted him, but that trust had been broken too many times. The family began to face the truth as well. Slowly, relatives and close friends who had once laughed at me or ignored me started asking questions. They confronted Vanessa about her years of manipulation, her lies, and the ways she had claimed credit for what wasn't hers. I didn't need to say anything. The evidence was clear, and her empire's collapse spoke louder than words. The same people who once cheered at my humiliation now sat in silence, unsure of how to respond. Vanessa tried to explain herself, but no one was listening the same way. The power she had held over family gatherings and business decisions vanished. I watched from a distance, calm and unshaken. There was no satisfaction in seeing her humbled. I didn't need revenge to feel relief. The balance had returned naturally, and I no longer carried her weight on my shoulders. When the divorce was finalized, I walked away with dignity. There was no applause, no grand gesture, no celebration. Just quiet closure. I understood that my life didn't need validation from anyone else, not from my husband, not from Vanessa, and not from the family who had doubted me. The respect I had earned came from my actions and my strength, not from their approval. I moved into my own space and focused on myself. I rebuilt routines, pursued work that mattered to me, and embraced the calm that came with independence. I let go of anger, resentment, and the desire to explain myself to those who never understood. I was finally free to live on my terms. Looking back, I realized that the divorce was not just an ending, it was a reckoning. It was a moment when truth surfaced, when fairness replaced favoritism, and when I chose myself over fear, over humiliation, and over disappointment. I carried no bitterness, only clarity and peace. That was the victory I had been waiting for. After the divorce, I began rebuilding my life from the ground up. I found a small apartment of my own, simple and quiet, where I could finally think and breathe without anyone watching or judging. I returned to work with renewed focus, taking projects that challenged me and allowed me to use my skills fully. For the first time in years, my efforts were recognized for what they were, not hidden behind someone else's name. I spent a lot of time reflecting. The humiliation I had suffered at Vanessa's hands, the silence from Daniel, and the way the family overlooked me, it all felt like a heavy burden at first. But slowly, I began to see it differently. That pain had awakened something inside me. It had forced me to pay attention, to understand my own worth, and to act when others assumed I would remain invisible. I realized that what had been presented as my weakness was actually the starting point of my strength. There was no public celebration of what I had endured or achieved. No one clapped for me, and no one recognized the effort it took to untangle the years of manipulation and false credit. That didn't matter. The quiet victories, the ones no one saw, carried the most meaning. I felt proud because I had regained control over my life. I had survived betrayal and humiliation without losing myself in the process. I focused on small, meaningful things, organizing my home the way I liked it, managing my own finances, building routines that supported my growth, and reconnecting with people who genuinely cared for me. Every choice reminded me that I no longer needed approval to feel worthy. Every day, I reinforced that my voice mattered and that my presence was valuable. Strength, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's quiet. It's in the decisions you make when no one is watching. It's in the patience to wait for the right moment, the courage to act without anger, and the wisdom to walk away when respect isn't offered. My life had finally become mine because I chose it, step by step, calmly, and intentionally. As I looked back on everything, the family gatherings, the public humiliations, Vanessa's empire, and the divorce, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. I had survived, learned, and grown. I had chosen myself, and in doing so, I had finally understood my value. That realization was stronger than any applause or recognition. For the first time, I was free, confident, and at peace, and nothing anyone else said or did could take that away from me.